Very welcome to Pustervik and Göteborg Film Festival. My name is Jonas Holmberg and I'm the artistic director of the festival, and it's nice to see you here. Now we will meet one of Europe's finest filmmakers, in my opinion. She is the president of this year's jury for the Ingmar Bergman International Debut Award, where 8 films are competing for this award. So she has served as a jury for 3 days now, and she's also presenting her new film Chevalier in the Masters section of the festival. Please give a warm welcome to the director Athina Rachel Tsangari.
Hello. I'm very happy to be here.
Wonderful. Welcome. During this masterclass, we will kind of go through, make a little hike through the years of your career, and of course ending up with a little bit longer discussion on Chevalier. I don't know how many of you guys have seen it, but there is some problem with this one. Is okay, but there are still screenings to come in our main cinema Draken. I know there is a screening, and you should definitely see the film if you have not already. But first, I just want to ask you: you just finished your jury work, your jury work for the Ingmar Bergman competition. How are you as a juror? Are you tough?
Yes, I'm very tough. I guess because I am, I make a point of watching films while making them, which after years of showing films in film festivals, I realized that actually that's not the case for lots of my colleagues. To be watching films, to still be voracious and cinephiles. Yeah. So I didn't start as a film director, and one of my first jobs was a film archivist at the Museum of Modern Art, and then I was running my own festival while I was a film student. So actually the whole experience of programming and watching films is, I consider, part of my duty and my pleasure as a filmmaker.
I think many filmmakers maybe start off as cinephiles, but then they kind of phase that out after a while, and they go to festivals and are only in the bar and they're never at the cinema. How do you keep your interest in for other people's films alive?
Because otherwise, why would I make films if I don't love cinema? I make films because I love cinema. So just loving my own films would be extremely pretentious, right? And a waste of time. You know, the whole idea is to be fed from each other and to have this dialogue. And there is nothing better for me than, it's really hard making films, especially when you come from my country. So to actually go to festivals or just go to a movie theater at like 2 in the morning in the afternoon and leave at 1 in the morning and just watch everything is not just a gift, but it's essential.
We are very happy to have had you here as a hard-working juror, and we are looking forward to learning your decision. But now, let's go to the very start, or at least maybe first big point of your career, which was your debut feature film called The Slow Business of Going, which is quite strange film set in hotel rooms about a woman working in some kind of dream industry how did this film come about, and what does it mean for you today? Or
Again,
maybe we should start watching by watching the clip.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
We have a
watch
clip.
the trailer.
We have a clip from this film. Maybe we should start by watching it. Can we? Permanent erection for the eye, as was quoted on screen, which brings Chevalier to mind, of course. So I'll rephrase my question, or I will repeat it. How this film come about, and what does it mean to you today?
So it's this is my, and I'm sorry, this is like really crappy quality for the trailer, but it says a lot about the way we made it too. This is my thesis film from the University of Texas in Austin. I am Greek, but actually I came of age as a filmmaker in the States with a grant that I received. And you know, because it's important as a context to know that still today there is no film school in Greece. There is no way, if you actually want to study production, to go to the university. There's a few private schools that are mostly for boys who want to avoid the army. So actually lots of our directors, especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s, became a director trying to avoid the army. But you know, I didn't have to go to the army.
So does this make a like pacifist film industry in Greece?
No. So you know, this is a film that I started already in my first year of graduate school, and I ended it 5 years later. So in a way, it was my film school. It's very much a hybrid film between fiction, documentary, diary, and it was actually before the internet. You know, the boom of the internet, the idea of social media and avatars and vicarious lives And it is about, in a way, it was my metaphorical autobiography as this woman who works for this a bit in the future as a travel agent, who is sent by her agency all over the world to gather experiences and then download them in the headquarters of this agency for the people who don't care to travel and they just want to experience vicariously by tapping into her memories. It was done, in a very low budget way, very low tech way, but 5 years later, Facebook exists and Instagram, and in a way, this was sort of like the analog Instagram of what happened in the internet, because that's the idea, that she herself doesn't have a life, she doesn't have relations, she lives for others and to share the experience through transient places. So she's a nomad. She's a perpetual nomad. And we shot in 9 different cities through grants and through that I was able to, it was shown in Greece. And I think for my colleagues who, up until then, it was very difficult to be a young person and have your film funded. No one takes you seriously unless, especially if you have like strange films. So you had to wait for years to be funded by the Greek Film Center. So it was a film that did a lot in terms also of the way it was made, because lots of filmmakers of my generation started thinking, oh, maybe we can make films with each other. With The Slow Beast of Going was made with Super 8. It was also an archive of the transition in technology. So we started it with 16, it had Super 8, we went through mini DV, and we ended up with the first HD. And it was actually the first film that employed all the technologies that was conformed into digital. And then it was scanned, the whole thing, and transferred to 35. And it was actually in American labs. That was the first film that did that.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, in DuArt, which is this historic lab in New York. So then, because of that, also because of the way that I worked with all sorts of media, and it had this very collage, pastiche, the artistic director of the ceremony of the Olympics, of the Athens Olympics, saw the film and called me up and said, and they were all a bunch of avant-garde artists, which was unheard of, in a country like Greece, to have avant-garde artists design the ceremony to the Olympics. And he said, whatever you did in The Slow Beast of Going, I want you to do in all the videos and projections and lasers and all of the screens in the opening ceremony. And you have a couple of $1 million to do that. And just do this, with a homemade technique that you have developed and with your own team. And then we said, we don't need a couple of millions. We can do it as basically low-budget artists. Budgets are very important, especially in a country like Greece. And so then I suddenly I was like in an opposite milieu, like creating one of the biggest spectacles, television spectacles in the world.
Shall we have a small look at this?
Yeah. How many
ceremony?
people have happened to see that? The opening ceremony.
Of the
Okay.
Athens Olympics.
Okay. All right.
Shall we have a look at this? They often they ask film directors to direct these kind of ceremonies. I know they asked Zhang Yimou for the Beijing Olympics, but it's quite unique, I think, or might be, that they asked someone who just made a very strange and spacey student film. How did you? Wasn't it a shock for you to adapt to this format after making this very small film?
To me, it was important because I hadn't been in Greece for 10 years. And that was, I was 12 years. I was gone since I was 18, and I was not an adult when I left. So suddenly I come back with an experimental, very messy film, where it's like everything I want to say about the world and about me and about cinema was all like there, like a vomit. But then, there was something about Greece reconfiguring its identity and updating it in a way that would, this is in a way our take in the history of the Greek identity. But I knew that I was speaking from my generation, and that was really exciting. The fact that actually, this ceremony really encouraged people to think, okay, we're part of the world of today, and it's not this archaeophilia, that antiquity.
Do you think you mean that this is what has characterized Greek identity until now?
Yeah. So to actually make a leap with modernity, with the contemporary world, was
to space. To
space, yeah. So one of the first things I want to do is to actually direct astronauts. So I called NASA and I said, we're doing this, and can we have, the two guys who are up there right now, salute the people of Greece who are doing this and the people of the world, So it was, so everyone wants to do something for the Olympics because of the viewership. But, the idea of connecting the past and the future in such a tactile way. You saw everything was made with cutout animation, Super 8. Thank you. It was also a gesture in terms of, look, we can do the ceremony with $5 and five of us. The entire crew of everything you saw for the design and stuff were very, very small team. So it was also a political gesture to the rest of the artists that we can do a lot with very little. And that's something that I learned in the States, because unlike European cinema, which is very heavily state-funded, in the States you have Hollywood, which is right now 5%, and then there's this vast 95-90%, which are all people who are doing it completely themselves. And you see some of the stuff in the festival, and it's usually breakthrough cinema. So that's how the ones with my colleagues who created that, we decided that it was much more important to stay in Greece and start a film company and create cinema in a completely independent way than going back to America. So that's how we started House Film.
Yeah. And a few years later, you had your first big success in cinema, but not as a director, but as a producer.
Yeah.
With the film Dogtooth, which won every award out there, and it was so good.
It went to the Oscars.
Yes.
And yeah.
And was this the result of this new collaboration?
Yeah. So we started the company, and I met Yorgos about that time, and he.
We're talking about Yorgos Lanthimos,
yes,
the director of this film. Yeah.
And he was ready to make his first. He was a successful commercial director, an extremely talented theater director too. So he was ready to make his first film. So we made Kineta, which is a film that had a festival career, but it didn't quite make the splash that Dogtooth had. So we're just a filmmakers collective in a way, and I love being a producer as much as a programmer and as a director and as a writer and as a curator. I see it, depending on the project, I can just concentrate on that with equal conviction. I think it's important for me to call myself a filmmaker rather than a film director.
Yeah.
And then also with Yorgos's encouragement, and because it's important to have people around you who are your co-pilots. And I thought I was not going to direct again. I was so much enjoying this mini revolution that we're doing in terms of updating the means of production. We're talking about a country where a young director was 50 years old. And, there's like 10 films made or were made. Now maybe there's like 30 or 40. So it was, it felt like it was a very political action, for us to prove that we can make films with nothing, without going through any state funding, with our friends, and having quality. And then after Dogtooth, I wrote Attenberg.
Yes, which was your breakthrough as a director, and made you famous, and made you also come here.
Yes.
Where you competed in the same competition where you are now one of the jurors. I think we have a clip from Attenberg. I think we should maybe play just a little bit of it.
Just the beginning.
Because we have time to come to your new projects
yes.
also. Just end up in 10 years ago. If you haven't seen this film, see it. It's truly great. Something I think is interesting here is looking at your first film, The Slow Business of Going, and also the Olympic ceremony. There is very much an engagement and a closeness, and lots of things, and it's cyberspace, and it's this and that, and everything together. But then in Dogtooth, that you produced in Attenberg, but also in Alps and Chevalier and future projects, I think there is a very different style, and there is much more you have a style where you distance yourself from action, and I think you also want to make this evident because of the title of the film, which is Attenberg, which is coming from the British, I think he is, the documentary filmmaker David Attenborough, who filmed animals, basically, and it seems like you are filming animals as well, and that you want to, by the title, also point this out very much. That do you agree with this, that there is a shift in aesthetics and attitude, and how would you describe it yourself? And what was the reason for this?
Yes. An important part, though, that has been consistent is the acting, the kind of acting. I mean, Slow Business was a collage, but in each one of the episodes, the acting was very much there in terms of approach, sort of like distantiated a bit, and this kind of like screwball, gray, white humor in a way instead of black. The influence of my heroes like Euripides, Beckett, Pinter, the Marx Brothers, Buster Keaton, there is, or Godard. So yeah, the Slow Business of Going, as I said, was a school. So I was experimenting with lots of stuff just to figure out where exactly I could land, with my own voice. But I think that if you see Slow Business again, each one episode individually, and Attenberg, for example, the acting, which is to me the most important way that I work, the way actors are in and out of their skin at the same time it's been very consistent. And I think if you have to say something about the new Greek cinema, is the way we are working with a very long tradition of ancient Greek tragedy, that we grow up with, and no one knows that we spend our summers in theaters watching Aeschylus and Euripides, Sophocles, Aristophanes.
You do that still?
We do. So it's this kind of acting, which is very, very corporeal, and at the same time not. There is this conflict there that's part of our tradition as viewers, as contemporary Greeks. And it's the same thing that I did in Chevalier, and it keeps evolving in terms of the eternal conflict between character and actor. But this is something that my research as a director is primarily on that.
Yeah. Shall we watch a small clip from Chevalier also, or the trailer? Yeah.
Yes.
So then we can go into discussions about this, which is screening at the festival and screening. I think it's on Saturday again.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
a funny film?
Yes, it's on.
That's not passed the Bechdel test. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Yeah.
Definitely not. And the numbers that were on the screen were points that these 6 men in the film receive in a competition that they have on a luxurious boat sailing or by engine maybe in the ocean outside Greece. And it's a very funny film, and they compete in everything. And it's about who the competition is about who is the Chevalier, who is the best in general, which is very, very extremely funny premise, I think. And then they are competing in everything. Who can put together IKEA furniture best? Who has the biggest erection? Who is better at sleeping? Who is better at eating? Who is better at washing windows, etc., etc. Like everything is competition between those, like highly educated kind of upper class men on this boat. This is a very wonderful film, and it's a wonderful idea to start with for a film, and I think you're also handling this subject and idea so well. How did you come up with this, and what is the basis of this film?
It's really quite difficult for me to always trace back to how an idea is born.
Yeah. Okay.
It just happens suddenly, and because I resist being very direct with message meaning production, but I've been living in Greece in the middle of all this chaos, and I guess it was my way to cope with this. So, like all these men on a boat that breaks down and has nowhere to go, and they're just stuck there playing games that are futile, and in the end no one really wins. And the only thing is just show who has the biggest penis, basically. I don't know, does it ring a bell? It's quite an easy film to understand, so... It was my way of commenting on what we all go through. But, I love comedy, and it's very important to always infuse the situations that I create with my actors, actually. The film was written with Athina Philippou, who is the permanent co-writer of Yorgos Lanthimos. And we've been friends for a very long time, and it was actually quite fun, a man and a woman coming up with this scenario. And then I cast it for a very long time, very, very strong personalities, and not necessarily actors. And we had access to the boat for about 2 months to rehearse. So actually every single actor infused the character with their personality. They were playing lots of Chevalier between them during the rehearsal. And in the end, it was a film which was very much about competition and antagonism, power. How do you gain power, and how do you claim your self-worth for yourself, but also for your milieu?
It's obvious that it must have been so much fun creating all those competitions. But, do you think it's necessary to have competition for improvement?
Yes.
Are you a big competitor yourself?
Yes.
Yes. In what way?
I don't know. There's only one way. You just go. It's different to be antagonistic and competing for your your place in the world. If I weren't competing, I would never have been a filmmaker. I would be a teacher, because that's, when I grew up in the 80s, it would be inconceivable to be a woman filmmaker, internationally. Especially coming from a family who are not artists, they didn't encourage me to. They were completely unhappy when I left to go to the States to be an artist, basically. They've come around to it now, but it took like 20 years. So I think it's important to, and especially when you're in a society that doesn't understand you as a gender, as race, as class, as, to go out there and fight for your identity. So it's, I draw the line. This movie, it was all about competition, but it was made with so much camaraderie and so much love, that in a way the process of the film and the kind of model that we had as a film crew, as a film system, was the opposite of what was on the screen. But what was on the screen, there was, I would like to think, tenderness for the characters from my part, and from the actors for themselves, because we made it with so much togetherness. There's lots of, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there seems to be a trend for lots of cold cinema, and lots of mean, cold characters.
Is this your perspective after watching the films in our competition here?
No, no, because actually, I think all of the films in at least my competition were, there was a connecting thread of humanism, which I really appreciated. But there seems to be a trend, like in the last 10 years or something, of very cold, very, I should say, very depressing, very grim, and I think that, so maybe my dual training, in the States, and at the same time coming from like Greek melodrama, which is always so like dark and poetic and dark romantic. Maybe this combination of bringing these two traditions together is what I'm trying to negotiate in everything I do.
Yeah. When we did this walk through your career and also through kind of the history, it's evident that 12 years ago you did the opening of the Olympics, and now you do a film that at least easily can be read as some kind of metaphor of the economic crisis and the political crisis and the crisis of patriarchy.
Yeah.
How do you think that what has happened in Greece from the big party in Athens 12 years ago to what is going on right now has affected Greek cinema and your filmmaking?
I think it would be too naive and simplistic to say that all of the financial woes on Greece started, from the Olympics, or because you have examples, for example, like Spain and Barcelona, where basically, the entire city restructured itself and its tourism because of that. We were not able to do that. because there's so much corruption and lack of vision. The crisis had started in Greece, 10 years, 15 years before the Olympics.
So you don't want to take the blame for the crisis because they used too much money on the opening ceremony.
And I can tell you how much money we used, and I'm sure this did not bankrupt Greece. No, but at the same time, yeah, it is the eternal mismanagement of a nation, basically. It was a breakthrough decade because suddenly, because of the Olympics, we were on a huge debt, but also it's the first time that we had the metro, so now people can, go to work.
Yeah, we're still waiting for that here.
Really?
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that having lived in Greece for the last, oh my God, it's so many years now. It's, every year we kept coming to terms with the fact that our generation, and more than anything, the generation after us and the generation after our next generation, they're completely fucked. And it's not because, I personally resist, and I have a huge issue with the fact that my generation is being accused of not paying our taxes or of not having a vision, because that's not our case. It's the governments, that of course we vote for, but for lack of better choices. There are no choices anymore, and governments don't even matter, because it's all the financial institutions that run our governments anyway. So you feel that there is you feel hopeless, because we do our parts as artists. We also pay our taxes religiously. We have a small production company that is really trying, that has made a difference in terms of Greek cinema, and we're ambassadors to our own country that doesn't give a damn about us. So, it's important to separate the governments from the people.
We don't have very much time left, so I think we should round up this, but on a slightly more maybe happy note than this description of current Greek society. So let's move back to your filmmaking and maybe look a little bit into the future. Mm-hmm. After these wonderful films that you have made, Slow Business is Going, Attenberg and Chevalier, which are your feature films, and you have also made several short films, which I would love to discuss here. The Capsule, I think it's online. Watch it if you can. But what are you working on currently? Do you have some upcoming projects that we can maybe see here at the festival or someplace else in the future?
I'm working on a science fiction film. That has been the script I've been working with my partner for quite some time. It's a science fiction film that I would love to shoot in Greece. And then I'm also working on I'm not sure how to describe it, a caper.
A caper?
Caper movie. It's like a crime, noir, screwball comedy. It always has to be some kind of comedy and some kind of screwball. So I'm working on it I'm at Harvard right now, and teaching and having a fellowship to write my script. So I feel, for the first time that I can do it in a supported way.
Thank you. I am looking very much forward to seeing both of these films.
Thank you.
They sound very interesting. And we have to end this now, but please, if you didn't see Chevalier, see it. It's well worth the time, I promise you. And let's end up with a big applause for Athina Rachel Tsangari.
Thank you.